Humanity Matters.
Hello, and thank you for joining me today. I'm your host, Richard Acritelli, and on today's episode of The Fog of War and Humanity here on HMTV, my special guest is retired doctor and jack of all trades, Bernie Furshpan, will join me for a conversation about the World War II and Holocaust experiences of his parents and his efforts to ensure that this vital piece of history is never forgotten. Bernie, here we go. Let's get started. Where did you grow up, and what were your interests as a kid?
That's a good start. That's a very good. I wanted to be a pilot when I was a kid, and I grew up in Brooklyn for most of my, young life. I was born in Israel, but since age 6, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York.
What year were you born?
57.
57.
I just gave away my age.
Okay. All right. Well, you're looking pretty sharp. I don't know. You look good.
Okay.
So, now. You're born in Israel?
Yes.
How long did you stay there before you came here?
6 years.
6 years.
And I have very vivid memories, but I've been back many times.
Where in Israel did you live?
Right outside of Tel Aviv. But I was born in a hospital in Jaffa.
Okay.
And Jaffa was an Arab community. I don't know, most people don't know that the Arabs and the Jews in Israel proper get along famously. So I just want to make that, because people may wonder, how come you were born in an Arab hospital?
Sure.
But then I grew up in Brooklyn, and what my interests were, I loved some sports like basketball and swimming. I was on the swimming team in my high school.
And where was that? What was your high school there?
So I went to James Madison High School in Brooklyn, New York.
And what town was that in there?
Or
what area?
I would say it's the Bedford area, not the Bedford, but the Kings Highway area.
Okay.
People call it the Highway.
Okay.
So it was a very nice neighborhood. But I grew up in Marine Park. It was a very tough Italian neighborhood. I was the only Jewish kid on the block. And I ate in all the Italian homes over there, comparing the meatballs and the sauces.
So today, what are your favorite Italian dishes that you still enjoy?
My favorite Italian dish that I still enjoy is eggplant parmesan.
Wow.
I love a really good eggplant parmesan.
And you got some good meals as a kid, huh, growing up?
Yeah, because my mom used to make the Polish food. That's what they knew, right? And so sometimes it smelled like a dead body in the refrigerator. And I said, Mom, why can't you make spaghetti meatballs like the Russos next door? And she says, I don't know how to do all of that. They didn't have Instagram and TikTok and all of that. So I used to sneak out of the house and eat at Mrs. Russo's house.
Wow.
And then she asked me the ultimate question. Are my meatballs better than Mrs. Macalusso's meatballs? Because they were always, competing with each other.
And you had to watch what you said, right?
I always said yes.
Yeah,
and
sure.
if I was in Macalusso's home, I would say the same thing. Yes, yours are the best. And of course, they fed me the eggplant and the chicken parmesan like nobody's business. That's the way you talk in Brooklyn, like nobody's business.
Yeah. Now, Mrs. Russo's meatballs helped with your assimilation to this country, right?
It sure did, because to me it was, even though it was Italian, it was American food. And my mother panicked because I wasn't eating her kishkas, you know what I'm saying, and the chopped liver. And so she panicked and she ran out, and she thought this was American food, which it was at the time. She bought something that was brand new called shake and bake. So she would throw a drumstick in this little sack, and then she got it seasoned and threw it into the oven, and that was my upbringing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your mom, she adapted, right?
She adapted. She was a wonderful human being.
Yeah.
She was an angel because she raised my dad. Not just me and my brother, but she raised my dad because he was traumatized from age 10.
So she was like the strong pillar to your family.
She was. Forget it. And she protected my dad like a cat protects its kittens. She would scratch your eyes out.
Now, when you were in school, what were some of your academic interests?
Very good question. I really love biology. I wasn't great at math or physics. I wasn't a numbers person. I was more a creative. I guess that's a right brain. I already forgot which brain.
Yeah,
my brain is shrinking. My left brain and right brain is shrinking, so I forgot which brain does what. But anyway, I was more creative, and I loved cartooning and drawing and creating, pottery and things like that, and using my hands. I love to fix things.
And just staying active, right?
Right. And then I ended up working in a Coney Island hospital.
Okay.
So because I was a pre-med, but I wanted to fly a plane.
So you're pre-med.
Yeah.
You graduate from high school.
Right.
Where do you end up?
I ended up in Stony Brook University in their pre-med program.
What year was that?
That was 75.
So Stony Brook is relatively a young university at the time.
It was. And I was very proud to go there. I was the cartoonist at the university. I did the cartoons for their 2 magazines. And I had a great time. But then I had headaches at the time. And even though I worked in a hospital, they couldn't help me. And somebody suggested a chiropractor. I never heard of this term. But I went to a chiropractor and my headaches actually vanished.
Wow.
And I said, there's no cutting, there's no blood, there's no guts. Maybe this is what I want to do. And I went into it.
And that's the path that you took?
That's the path I took. I went to the New York Chiropractic College.
Where was that located?
So check this out. It was in the New York Tech campus just down the road here. And the first year I lived in Glen Cove.
A small world. That's where our studios are.
Right. So the first year I lived in Glen Cove. And after I moved out of Glen Cove, I never thought I'd ever be back. I love Glen Cove, but I just never thought I'd be back here. This is not where I wanted to end up. But I loved living here, but I never thought I'd ever be back. Now I'm here almost every day.
And that's a good thing.
It's a great thing.
Okay. Now, how long did you practice being a chiropractor for?
About 30 years.
And what was maybe your most rewarding thing that you were able to do?
Wow, I did a lot of great things. So I invented this maneuver that was named after me to correct herniated and bulging discs.
Wow.
It's an upright maneuver. And believe it or not, you have to use physics in order to do this maneuver to understand how it works. And I learned it from my dad because he did plastering, right? So he would have a mortar board, right? And he would have the plaster. And as he moved around, the vibrations made the mortar flatten. So he took the trowel and he scooped the mortar around and dumped it back in the middle. So it's the same physics in that the surfaces of the vertebrae, the bones in the spine, are also flat, like a mortar board. And so I moved them around to kind of scoop the jelly in the center of the disc back to the middle, and it works. It actually works, and I did it to thousands of patients.
Typically, what kind of patient received that type of,
somebody who has like sciatica or headaches or pain radiating into the arm. And it's an instant relief because it's literally the nerves are trapped. You've heard of pinched nerve, but they're really just trapped between the disc and the bone.
Wow.
And so if you can just move the disc back to where it belongs, it's very mechanical. The disc is like a ball bearing. If you can move it back to the center, it's no longer putting compression onto the nerve.
Now, I'm sure you probably had a lot of people who did physical work.
Yeah,
probably
I did.
Thank you for...
Oh, yes. I had a huge practice. I think I've seen over 20,000 patients in my life.
Wow.
And I had a pretty large practice. At one point, I was seeing between 700 and 800 patients a week.
Where was your practice located?
In Bay Shore. And it was basically blue-collar workers. And they were, to me, the best patients. They followed my instructions. They were great human beings who worked hard, appreciated everything. They appreciated the service we provide them. And we saw a lot of people. So I had to hire up to 5 chiropractors to work with me because we were just inundated 7 days a week.
Now, you say that your dad was, what was the job that he had done again? He was a plasterer.
Yeah, so he did, he was like a contractor, but a small contractor. It wasn't a big-time contractor. He would have 1-2 laborers at a time, and that's what he did. Plastering tile, cement. What he did was crown moldings. Like on Park Avenue, you have these very wealthy people with incredible crown moldings in their apartments up in Park Avenue. And he would do it by hand, manually. It was
some of the creativity that you had later on in life.
Yes, I got from him.
Originate with your dad.
Without question. I never put it that way in my mind, but thank you for enlightening me on that one. That's true.
So now your dad and your mom, your parents, very special people. They're immigrants to this country. The New York City residents. You have you and your brother, right? You have a twin brother,
correct.
Now, can you share their early lives back in Europe, back in Poland,
right?
At the start, and as we head into World War II?
Right. So my father lived on the eastern side of Poland, which is now the Ukraine. My mom lived on the western side, on the other side of Germany. And from what they remembered, they're no longer with us. From what they remembered, they had a wonderful childhood. My mom didn't remember that much because she was very young. But my dad remembered very well. He loved going to school. He loved his friends. He loved his little village of 1,500 Jewish people. And this little village was called a shtetl, which means like a small state. And it was, just a small little village in what is now the Ukraine. And
you had generations of people that lived there.
Many generations.
Over time, right?
Hundreds of years they've lived there.
So now World War II starts on September 1st, 1939.
Right.
Right before the war starts, you had the non-aggression pact between Hitler and Stalin, between Molotov and Ribbentrop, right? The foreign secretaries there. So part of the agreement is the division of Poland.
Correct.
So your mom, she lived in the western part, right?
Right.
And your dad lived in the eastern part.
Correct.
So they have a very unique living arrangement because the Nazis are going to control the western part early on, and the Soviets are going to control the eastern part.
Right.
Now, when does your mom leave the western part itself?
Right, and this is what's so interesting is that those that lived on the east, what they heard how Jews were being persecuted in Germany was hearsay. Many of those small villages didn't have radio or newspaper, so it's all hearsay. It was second, third, fourth generation information. Whereas my mom, when they found out that the Nazis crossed the border on the eastern side, on the western side, I should say, they immediately fled. So my grandmother picked up her 4 kids. It was a small town, and there was a train station there, and my mom was only 2, and she put them on a train headed to Russia. She was, of course, with them, but then she gets off the train and comes back with food for her crying children. They were hungry. The train has left on its way to Russia, 1,400-mile journey, and they got separated for 5 years. It took my grandmother 5 years to find my mom.
Unbelievable.
And she found her in a Christian orphanage in Russia.
Now, what happened with your grandmother? Did she stay in Poland, or did she go into Russia? Did she...
So that's the part I'm still investigating. I don't know all the details. I just don't understand. It took her 5 years. How did she survive those 5 years? Where did she sleep? How did she get money? How did she eat? How did she find them? They were all 4 kids were separated throughout Europe. And she found all 4.
And all Poland knew at that time was the brutality of the war.
Correct.
And it's amazing that...
So I think that she probably assumed that they went all the way to the end of the, of the ride, which took maybe a couple of weeks because maybe they stayed in certain stops for a long time.
Sure.
It's a long journey.
And they went far enough to be out of reach of the German invasion of Operation Barbarossa.
Correct.
That went to the doorsteps of Moscow and then down towards Stalingrad. And, it took, I would say, 2.5 years, almost 3 years to force the Germans out of
Right. So maybe
Soviet
my grandmother
territory.
had to hide when she was looking for them. I don't know how she figured this out. Maybe she stayed in a convent for 4 years, and then the last year she ended up looking for them. I don't know.
So she found your mom, right? Where did they end up going, like later on? Where did they end up going?
From what I recall, they ended up going to Italy, probably a displaced persons camp, if I'm not mistaken. But I have no photographs to prove that. I don't have any stories, but you know that they had DP camps in Germany, Austria, and Italy. And I think she ended up in Italy, from what I recall. And then they went to Israel, I think, after the war, yeah.
Okay, now your dad now is on the eastern part of Poland itself. Right. And he's not only going to see the Soviet occupation, but he'll be there for the German occupation of that part of Poland as well. Mm-hmm. What were some of the things that he might have spoke about his early parts of the war? Right.
So what he recalled, and those that survived from the 1500, about 30 made it out alive. And those that survived got together to draw maps of the village and tell stories. And so this brought back all of his memories. that there was, in fact, a welcoming committee for the Nazis. So because this was so remote, this village, they didn't believe that the Nazis could do such things. And so they didn't want to leave because where are they going to go, you know? So that was they decided to stay.
Was the welcoming so much because they hated the Soviets? The Soviets, one thing about the Poles,
Right.
they never liked the Russians dash the Soviets. Was that part of it, you think?
Well, my
Some
dad
of the friction?
remembered that the Soviets were not nice.
No.
They looted, they beat them up. They didn't kill en masse, though. You know what I'm saying? But when they retreated to Russia, they told the Jews, you better come with us because they're really going to kill you. And they said, nah, look, we've been through this. Look at how we dealt with you. That's probably the same. They thought it was the same. So they put together a welcoming committee, and the Gestapo were the first to enter the village.
Unbelievable.
And then they executed the welcoming committee of 3 people who had wine, gold, food, to soften them up a little bit. It didn't matter. You know, they came in and they immediately executed the welcoming committee and rounded up the Jews.
And they saw them as the leadership of the community itself.
Yeah.
And they did away with them.
Immediately. But then there was a mayor who was a collaborator, and he handed over to the Gestapo the manifest of all the residents, and they saw who was missing. My dad was missing, and they put out a warrant for his arrest.
How old was your dad?
10 years old.
10 years old.
10 years old.
So that would be roughly, probably 4th grade. I'd say 5th grade today.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So now where does he end up going? There's a warrant out for him.
Right.
Where does he flee to?
Well, he was told by my grandfather to go watch a cow of a Protestant farmer, what they call Missourians. And they worked as a community to rescue Jews. There were a lot of good people, but they risked their lives. And this farmer told my dad, forget about the cow, go run to the forest because they're going to kill you. And my dad ran to the forest. It was about a 2-mile run, the size of, it was like the woods, the size of Eisenhower Park. And he stayed there for 3 years, like a hunted animal. And they were hunting him down. They were hunting down the others, too, that were hiding.
Did that farmer give him any assistance other than
no,
the
as far
nudge
as I
to
know,
get him away?
Let me tell you, that's enough, because, and that's a lot, because he risked his life. Because if any collaborator or Nazi saw him direct my dad, they would kill him and his family. But he chose to be an upstander.
Wow. Now, what were some of the things that your father had to do to survive in the woods, especially, to look for food,
right?
The weather. I mean, those are some brutally cold areas.
You look at snow falling down, and then you see how it layers on top of the branches of trees, and you say, wow, what a beautiful winter wonderland. But to my dad, it was a completely different perspective. It was a nightmare. It wasn't a winter wonderland. It's a night. He had to sleep in the snow and the rain and the cold. It got down to minus 20 degrees. And so what did he eat? He ate berries. And some of these Missourians, the Protestants, would come into the forest to show the Jews in hiding what to eat. And he said he ate berries, mushrooms, and tree bark. And if there was a rabbit carcass, he would eat that. Wow. And there were animals that were lurking, in the forest. There were wolves and bears and coyote.
Was there anything like later on in life that your dad, it would like kind of spark some of the memories where he wouldn't eat certain things, or, you think about the snow, years later, right. I'm sure he was just glad for the snow to go away because it wasn't great memories. Was there things that sparked?
You see, it may have sparked something, but he never revealed it to me. Not snow for sure, but, and he used to tell me that he slept in these conditions. And then, I was just a kid, and, these are just stories. It's like, oh, thank God I don't have to do that. But you don't realize how awful it is and how extreme it is. You see that show Survivor, and it's a joke because they're on an island with a coconut tree and there's fish in a pond. And, and then there's a camera crew, And this is true survivalship, what my dad went through. So when he came out, he appreciated every little thing, every morsel of food, even toilet paper.
So now what years are we looking at when he was in the forest? From end of 1941?
Right. It was actually July 7th, 1941, when the Nazis entered the village, and he was there till January of 44. But understand that he ran into the forest with summer clothes. He had to somehow get material clothing to cover himself, to protect himself in the winter. So I don't know how he did that.
So he had to learn how to adapt very quickly.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, he had to dig a ditch, cover himself with leaves and branches, and that's how he slept and hid.
Now, once he's there, does he move around from place to place? Was there ever any stories that he almost got caught or anything like that?
Yes, he almost did get caught many times. He ran out of the forest to steal food. There was a Nazi sitting somewhere and saw my dad. He didn't know he was Jewish, so he told him to come over, and he made my dad light his cigarette. So that's a crazy thing. But what happened inside the forest, I'll tell you one story if you want to hear. So he was one night, because during the daytime he gave a mother some food. She had a child that she was, protecting and trying to keep alive. I mean, this is an awful thing to put mothers in. And they were sleeping at night together. She let him stay with her and her baby, and the Nazis came through at night, only at night, because Jews were sleeping, and they knew that their German shepherds would sniff them out. So they're cutting through the darkness with their flashlights, and the dogs are barking from a distance, and the baby starts to cry. And mothers were put in this situation millions of times where they had to make a decision of two choices, a very bad choice and a worse choice. And so many children were silenced because of this.
Yeah, one is getting caught and one is killing your own.
Yeah, I mean, it's either either you suffocate the child, you silence the child, or you all get killed.
Yeah.
There's no good decision here. And so she took my father's hand, a 10-year-old boy. She took his hand and forced him to silence the baby. She made a child silence a child. And I remember times when my dad would wake up and cry. I remember when he was upset about certain things, and I didn't understand why. They would sob when they would watch films about the Holocaust. And later on, my mom told me this story. He couldn't even put a voice to this story. It was too painful to him. So this is an awful thing that children will put through.
Did your dad ever talk to anybody later on about?
No, it was more my mother that told me the stories. He did tell me some basic things, but nothing like that. That's pretty horrific, what he went through.
Now, your dad, you're a busy guy.
Yeah.
You come here.
Yep.
You have your, career as a doctor over the years. You have a family.
Yep.
You have somewhere to go after this, right?
Mm-hmm, I do.
Was your dad a very busy individual? And did that help him being busy?
Right. He was different than me. He was more... He was very creative, I'll tell you that much. But he wasn't as ambitious as me in terms of multiple careers. Maybe he was ambitious within his umbrella of things that he could do, because he was always willing to try something new. If somebody said, listen, have you ever done, crown molding? He probably said yes. And so let me do it. And he figured it out. He learned. But he learned these skills, and that's where I got my skills from in terms of, switching careers sometimes. Not that I hate the careers. I actually loved everything I've done. It's just that if you want to do something else, don't be afraid to try.
Yeah,
that's what I learned. That's what I learned, because my dad, if it was dangerous here, he would move over there, no problem. And so, but he pretty much became very good at what he did. He did so well at what he did. He was such a perfectionist that John Lennon of the Beatles hired him to do his bathroom and kitchen. That's how good he was.
Where was that?
At the Dakota building in Manhattan.
Wow.
And I still have those entry cards.
Amazing, right?
Yeah, it's a great story.
But like for your dad, was that therapeutic for him to you in your own thoughts? When
now that I think about it, probably. Yeah, it's very therapeutic to be creative and to do work, and he probably thought a lot about
keeping your mind busy and everything, right?
Yeah, but he probably thought about his past. He missed his mom a lot. That's when my mom made him the comfort food that reminded him of his mother.
Sure. All right, so we're going to come back for a second episode, okay, with Bernie Furshpan here. Please join us as we come back here on HMTV.